after a consequential impeachment.
There have been 121 hours and 23 days. The resolution is adopted.
Suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton now faces his trial in the Senate.
And they are showcasing their absolute contempt for the electoral process.
But how will this impeachment trial play out?
I have to protect the jury. I have to keep this a fair trial. The defendant deserves a fair trial.
And what will the impact be when it's over?
Paxton is innocent of these accusations.
The people of the state of Texas are entitled to know whether their top cop is a crook.
A special edition of Ion Politics, the impeachment trial of Attorney General Ken Paxton, begins right now. Hello and welcome. I'm Jack Fink, political reporter at CBS News Texas. The impeachment of Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton is historic, and so is his upcoming trial September 5th. But we recognize a lot has happened to get us to this point, and many of you may be wondering what it all means and why it matters. So over the next half hour, we're going to break down for you who the key players are, plus how do we even get to this point, and what you can expect at the start of this trial. What are the rules and the arguments from Paxton's legal team and the House impeachment managers? Plus, what will the political fallout be for Republicans from this trial? But first, the high stakes. This impeachment trial is historic. Paxton is only the third Texas official and second statewide to be impeached. He's currently suspended, but if he's convicted in the Texas Senate, he could be permanently removed from office and may also be prevented from ever holding office in Texas again. And then there are his legal troubles, which predate his time as Attorney General. Paxton is under federal investigation and has been for nearly 3 years. According to an Austin American-Statesman report, a grand jury is looking into his ties to an Austin real estate developer who is under federal indictment in a separate case. Paxton also faces a long-delayed securities fraud trial. Before we can get to the state's securities fraud trial, we have the Senate's impeachment trial. Here's a quick look at the players you need to know. There are two parties to the impeachment trial. The first, the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who's facing 20 articles of impeachment. We'll break down what those articles allege in a few minutes. And let's discuss the other party, the House Board of Managers. This is a group of 7 Republicans and 5 Democrats who will act as the prosecution. Republican Andrew Murr of Junction will serve as the chair of the board. Ann Johnson, a Houston Democrat, will serve as the vice chair. The House Board of Managers will also be represented by 3 heavyweight prosecutors. Dick DeGuerin's list of former clients includes some big names, such as former U.S. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison and Branch Davidian leader David Koresh. Rusty Hardin has also represented high-profile clients, including NFL quarterback Deshaun Watson. The third attorney on the team, Harriet O'Neill, served as a justice on the Texas Supreme Court for more than a decade. On the other side, 2 prominent lawyers from Houston have been hired to defend Paxton. Tony Busby notably represented former Governor Rick Perry in a 2015 case over abuse of office charges. And Dan Cogdell, the other attorney on the defense team, represents Paxton in the state securities fraud case against him. Also on Paxton's defense team, 6 lawyers from the Attorney General's office. Senators will act as the jury in the impeachment trial. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, as president of the Senate, will act as the court's presiding officer. Texas has 31 state senators, and the threshold to remove Paxton from office is 21 votes. It's also worth mentioning there are 12 Democrats and 18 Republicans seated in the Senate. The 19th senator is Angela Paxton, Ken Paxton's wife from McKinney. She is not allowed to be an active member of the jury, and we'll explain why coming up. But how do we even get here? The moment the 3-term Attorney General was impeached by the Texas House and then immediately suspended from his job without pay.
The resolution is adopted.
It happened Memorial Day weekend, the final weekend of the regular legislative session. The 20 articles of impeachment against Paxton include abuse of public trust, being unfit for office, dereliction of duty, and constitutional bribery. In short, Paxton is accused of abusing his office to benefit himself and Nate Paul, an Austin real estate developer who donated $25,000 to his campaign. The path to impeachment began nearly 3 years ago, October 2020. That's when 8 of Paxton's top hand-picked officials in his office sent a letter to Human Resources at the Attorney General's office in which they accused the Attorney General of violating federal law, including allegations of bribery. In that letter, Paxton's top officials said they notified law enforcement and sent Paxton himself a text. The FBI in Austin began investigating Paxton. That ultimately led to the Attorney General to fire his deputies after calling them, quote, rogue employees. 4 of them filed a whistleblower lawsuit against the Attorney General's office. Fast forward to February of this year. This is when things really started to heat up. The Attorney General's office announced February 10th that it agreed to settle the lawsuit with 4 whistleblowers for $3.3 million, money that would come from taxpayers. And that did not sit well with Republican House Speaker Dade Phelan, who we interviewed 5 days later.
I don't anticipate that $3.3 million being in the House budget. Mr. Paxton is going to have to come to the Texas House. He's going to have to appear before the Appropriations Committee and make a case to that committee as to why that is a proper use of taxpayer dollars. And then he's going to have to sell it to 76 members of the Texas House. That is his job, not mine.
Do you support it personally?
No.
You don't? Why not?
I don't think it's the proper use of taxpayer dollars.
The chair calls the Honorable Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas.
Nearly 1 week later, Paxton and his office asked the House for $3.3 million in taxpayer dollars to settle the case.
General Paxton, would you be willing to pay for it out of your campaign account?
Paxton didn't answer any questions about the proposed settlement agreement with whistleblowers, but his office's litigation chief, Chris Hilton, spoke with lawmakers instead, telling them that Paxton isn't liable under state law. The Office of Attorney General is. What was unknown to Paxton and most lawmakers in the Capitol at the time, the Attorney General's office request sparked a secret investigation by the House General Investigating Committee in March. Fast forward now to May 23rd. That's when the committee went public with its investigation into Paxton's proposed settlement with the whistleblowers. It was officially known as Matter A.
A quorum is present.
The Texas House General Investigating Committee had the experienced prosecutors who investigated Attorney General Ken Paxton lay out their findings. Investigators for the House Committee explained the settlement would prevent a trial and keep details of the allegations against Paxton out of public view.
Do you feel like there's a lot of evidence there to support those allegations?
I do. Yes, Chairman, I do.
I do as well. Chair Murr?
Aye.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Representative Guerin?
Yes.
The Texas House General Investigating Committee recommended 20 articles of impeachment against him.
By proceeding with this illegal impeachment scheme to overturn a decision made by Texas voters just a few short months ago, the corrupt politicians in the Texas House are demonstrating that blind loyalty to Speaker Dade Phelan is more important than upholding their oath of office.
He walked out without taking reporters' questions. What will the impeachment trial look like, and what will the main arguments be on both sides? Plus, what will the political fallout be when it's all done? Those stories are coming up after the break. Welcome back. As you might expect, the impeachment trial has a lot of moving parts, and we want to walk you through what you can expect when it begins September 5th. 2 days after the Texas House overwhelmingly voted to impeach Attorney General Ken Paxton, House impeachment managers formally delivered the 20 articles against him to the Texas Senate. It is in the Senate chamber where the trial will take place, and Paxton will ultimately learn whether he's convicted and permanently removed from his position or acquitted and can keep his job. First, let's take a look at some of the 31 rules in place approved by the senators who will be the jurors deciding Paxton's fate.
And I remember learning the
one rule that made national headlines involves Ken Paxton's wife, Senator Angela Paxton, who represents McKinney. Senators found Mrs. Paxton has a conflict in the case and as a result is not allowed to be an active juror in the case. David Cole, an appellate attorney in Dallas, is not involved in the impeachment.
She is not allowed to vote on any matter, so not just the ultimate vote, but any procedural point that comes up along the way.
Even so, her position as a state senator could become very helpful to her husband's defense. By the numbers, the state constitution says 2/3 of the senators are needed to convict the attorney general. Because Mrs. Paxton can't vote, there will only be 30 senators who can decide the Attorney General's future. But Mrs. Paxton is still required to attend the trial, so all 31 senators will be counted, and that raises the 2/3 threshold needed to convict Paxton from 20 to 21.
The higher the threshold, the harder it gets, and sometimes one vote is all the difference in a case.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick will preside over the trial like a judge. He will decide on a number of issues during the trial. At the beginning, Paxton or his attorney will have to plead on each article of impeachment. While experts say impeachment is purely political, the trial will look a lot like a court case. The House Board of Managers or their lawyers who are prosecuting the case will make an opening statement, and Paxton's lawyers can make theirs right after that or when they present their own case after prosecutors finish theirs. Each can cross-examine witnesses. The trial will be streamed and open for the public to see. But senators, who are the jurors, will deliberate in private. The senators will vote on each article of impeachment against Paxton separately, and they will do so publicly in the chamber, standing up when they're called to say how they will vote. The House impeachment managers must prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. One major rule is the gag order imposed by the lieutenant governor to prevent statements that could prejudice the jury. It covers Paxton and his lawyers and the House impeachment managers and their attorneys, along with lawmakers and potential witnesses. At the beginning of the trial, senators will have to make some key decisions. They include whether to drop any of the 20 articles of impeachment against the Attorney General and whether he will have to testify, even if it means asserting his Fifth Amendment rights in public. From the start, Paxton and his legal team have sharply criticized the impeachment, calling it a sham. In response, the House impeachment managers provided new revelations in thousands of pages of documents against Paxton. Attorney General Ken Paxton has argued his re-election to a third term last November is reason enough to dismiss all of the articles of impeachment against him. Paxton said it shows voters knew about the allegations surrounding him and voted for him anyway. He chastised the House members during a public statement one day before they impeached him.
And they are showcasing their absolute contempt for the electoral process.
Paxton's legal team also said the House didn't have enough evidence to support the impeachment articles.
The impeachment articles that have been laid out by the House are baloney. Just so we're clear, the allegations are untrue.
But in their response, Texas House impeachment managers said, quote, Paxton can run, but he cannot hide. Both the Senate and the public are not yet fully aware of how bad Paxton's actions really were. The House then released nearly 4,000 pages of documents from their investigation into Paxton. The Attorney General is accused of abusing the power of his office to benefit himself and Nate Paul, a campaign donor who was under federal investigation and later indicted in an unrelated case.
The House manager's rebuttal here, with solid evidence appearing to support the argument, is no, they didn't. They may have known some things, but they certainly did not know the whole story.
Even though they are not criminal charges, Paxton is accused of constitutional bribery in 2 of the 20 articles of impeachment. In one of them, the House said Paul paid for renovations to the Attorney General's house in Austin. Paxton's executive assistant, Andrew Wicker, told House investigators that he was there when Paxton and the contractor spoke about placing a different countertop in the kitchen, which he believed was, quote, an additional 20 grand or something. Wicker said he heard the contractor say, I will check with Nate. Days later, Wicker said he asked Paxton about it directly, saying, quote, I heard this conversation. It kind of made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. It kind of came across as this type of arrangement, an arrangement in which Nate Paul might have been taking part in the home renovations. Wicker said, quote, General Paxton said that he appreciated me bringing those concerns to him, but he assured me that was not the case. Documents from the House impeachment managers show the contractor doing the work on Paxton's house emailed photos of the work to Paul and a man named Raj at the same company. And those records show on October 1st of 2020, Paxton wired more than $121,000 to Cupertino Builders, a firm whose corporate officer is listed as Raj, who's described as a friend and employee of Nate Paul's. The House says Cupertino Builders wasn't authorized to do business on that day. And that same day, October 1st, House records show Paxton's top hand-picked lieutenants in the office sent him a text telling him that they, quote, made a good faith report of violations of law by you to an appropriate law enforcement authority concerning his relationship and activities with Nate Paul.
What the trial's going to offer is human beings that can say, I was there and I can explain the relationship between all these different dots.
The other impeachment article in which Paxton is accused of constitutional bribery involves Paul hiring a woman the documents say Paxton was having an extramarital affair with. The House has said this made it easier for Paxton to see the woman because she moved to Austin from San Antonio. The documents accuse the Attorney General of using an Uber account under a fake name, a secret personal email account, and burner phones to hide his alleged affair and the extent of his relationship with Paul. House impeachment managers also say, quote, Paxton frequently ditched his security detail so he could meet with Paul and others, and that Uber records reflect drivers picked up Paxton under the alias of Dave P., a block from his home, and ferried him to his lover's or Paul's properties more than a dozen times in 2020. In exchange, Paxton is accused of providing Paul with favorable legal assistance from or specialized access to the Attorney General's office. Specifically, House documents say Paxton used his office to interfere with a federal investigation into Paul, among other things. Paxton's lawyers blasted the large number of documents that were released, saying, quote, House managers and counsel have engaged in a vindictive campaign to destroy the Attorney General's reputation under the guise of secretive proceedings, abusing the impeachment process, attorney-client privilege, this court's gag order, and the voting public's trust in our system of government.
Can't just let it sit out there, and it's going to be along the lines of this is just personal stuff that's being thrown out there to make the man look bad. The problem, though, is that connection back to the underlying relationship with Mr. Paul, and that's where I think the House managers are going to try to keep this going as this case heads into trial.
According to a Dallas Morning News report, the House Board of Managers will call Paxton to the witness stand. The newspaper cited confidential witness lists they obtained. Paxton has also requested 3 Democratic state senators, Nathan Johnson of Dallas, Jose Menendez, and Roland Gutierrez, both of San Antonio, be disqualified from voting to remove him from office because of past statements made against him. But Cole says he believes they will be allowed to remain active members of the jury. Eye on Politics. The impeachment of Ken Paxton continues after the break. Take a look at this. CBS News Texas captured these images of the inside of the Texas Senate chamber. It's already set up for the trial. Here is where the House Board of Managers will sit. This is where Attorney General Ken Paxton and his legal team will sit. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick will act as the court's presiding officer from this spot, and this is the witness stand. There is already political fallout from Attorney General Ken Paxton's impeachment, not just on him, but other Republican leaders and lawmakers, too.
The resolution is adopted.
When House members first heard details of the 20 articles of impeachment against Attorney General Ken Paxton, Representative Charlie Guerin of Fort Worth dropped a bombshell.
And I would like to point out that several members of this House, while on the floor of this House doing the state business, received telephone calls from General Paxton personally, threatening them with political consequences in their next election.
Guerin didn't identify the lawmakers he accused Paxton of threatening. The Attorney General's office didn't respond to our email requesting comment. But text messages obtained by CBS News Texas between Michelle Smith, one of Paxton's assistants at the AG's office, and Republican State Representative Jeff Leach of Allen show there were hard feelings over this matter. Back in February, when Paxton asked state lawmakers to fund the $3.3 million settlement with 4 whistleblowers he fired, Leach told reporters he was troubled by it and wanted a hearing. In a text message to Smith, Leach said, "I won't be talked out of doing my job and fulfilling my oath." Smith said, "I stood in 108-degree weather to get you elected. Never forget that. You want to go against me? Go ahead." It is Paxton's request, House members say, that led to their investigation and the impeachment. Some of Paxton's supporters are targeting Republican House members who voted to impeach Paxton.
I feel very comfortable about the vote I took.
State Representative Glenn Rogers of Grayford is among the majority of House members and Republicans who sent the articles of impeachment to the Senate. A conservative group, Defend Texas Liberty PAC, put up a billboard around Rogers' House district in Parker, Palo Pinto, and Stevens counties, which says he voted with 61 Democrats.
This is something our PAC, again, has done consistently with liberal Republicans wherever they are in the state.
Analysts say there is political pressure on Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who's close to Paxton and who will preside over the impeachment trial.
And so I have to protect the jury. I have to keep this a fair trial. The defendant deserves a fair trial.
During an interview with CBS News Texas in July, I asked the Lieutenant Governor about a Texas Tribune report that showed he received a $1 million contribution and a $2 million loan from the Defend Texas Liberty PAC. What do you say to Texans who may be concerned about that and your previous call and continued call for impartiality in the trial?
Well, Jack, there are people on many sides of this case who contribute to senators and to my campaign. And so we will all take a oath of impartiality, and that's not an issue whatsoever. And we're going to have a fair trial.
State Representative Justin Holland of Heath, who also voted to impeach Paxton, told me this impeachment is dividing the Republican Party.
There is a rift, and it's unfortunate. I think that what we should do as Republicans is focus on these victories that we've been able to do.
To recap, suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton is only the third Texas official to be impeached. The stakes are high. This could end Paxton's political career in Texas. As we've mentioned, this is a historic event, and there is a lot that remains to be seen. If you want to revisit any of the ground we've covered over the past 30 minutes, just head to cbsnewstexas.com and click on the Ken Paxton impeachment section on the home page. We will be in Austin when this trial begins on Tuesday, and we will be providing comprehensive coverage from the Texas Capitol. I'm Jack Fink. Thank you so much for watching this special edition of Eye on Politics, the impeachment trial of Attorney General Ken Paxton.